Okay, check 1 2, check 1 2, testing, testing. We are live. Please hit the like button. It really helps fuel the algorithm in the beginning. I know some people were like, oh, don't just start by asking people to hit the like button. Well, if you enjoyed this channel, then I'm asking you to please hit the like button. It does help spread it once it starts, and it helps people get notifications. If you have not hit the notification bell, please do so. And, that helps you just hopefully, if YouTube does what it's supposed to, get a notification every time that we go live. We do this once a week. This should be a good stream. It's going to be kind of a working session slash ask me anything type of discussion. We're not going to be discussing any specific, we're not going to be giving commentary. So we're going to be looking at some patterns that I've been chasing. We're going to be talking about chasing patterns in general. We're going to be discussing a profound insight that my wife, had, and I think that it's something that is worth sharing. And then also we're going to discuss what it means for an insight to be profound. And I think that a lot of times people say things that sound profound and feel profound, but that doesn't mean that they're not. It just, there's something subconsciously profound about a statement. But it's usually has to do with symmetry. So, we're going to talk about the relevance of symmetry in searching for fundamentalism and or fundamentality and objectivity, super subjectivity, whatever you want to call it. We're going to talk about how symmetry is the guiding constraint. So, like I said, please hit the like button and please comment any questions that you have in the chat. I will be, interacting with the live chat throughout the stream. And if you're not watching this live, comment your thoughts in the comments below. So, open this up. So pattern chasing. We'll start with that. Well, actually, let's start with a context. The context of my wife's statement. So, and talking about things that are profound. Profound things are not things that blow your mind, and there's this idea that what blows your mind is that which makes no sense in science. Okay, when we're talking about physics, especially when you have people going on physics, not physics channels, but channels that are not physics, channels like Joe Rogan or pretty much anywhere else that's not, a higher level physics channel, not even just not a physics channel, but people say things that make no sense to the listener, and then everybody acts like it is this mind-blowing fact that they just learned. Like the idea that there's 11 dimensions. I tell you that, I almost guarantee you have no idea what that means, because I don't even really know what that means. I don't think anybody really knows what that means. People think they know what it means, but if I tell you that there's 11 dimensions and that you exist in 11-dimensional hyperspace, you don't know even how to make sense of that, because I don't. And I think about it all day long. And that's not a mind-blowing revelation. It's not profound. It's just confusing. And what is truly profound are statements that make sense of not just within the context of themselves, but they provide context and make sense of too, and they make sense of so many other bits of information that have previously not been connected. And that's what a profound insight is. It's something that leads to more insights than just within the context of the immediate context of the insight itself. So, if you learn something and you realize that it's similar to something else, and that lets you predict a pattern that in a different context that is, accurate and leads to your understanding of something, that is a profound insight. So, for instance, when I first started this project, before I started this project, not when I first started this project, well before I first started this project, a couple of years before at least, um, uh, I was thinking about the simulation hypothesis. And I started thinking about if we're inside of a computer, and I'm not saying that we are, this is a perfect metaphor for exactly what's going on. It's not, but still, just bear with me. I started thinking about if we're inside a computer, then that would mean that the more calculations that are taking place, the more it would slow down the computer. And I realized that that made a lot of sense and was very, when you thought about the concept of space-time and gravity's effect on space-time, and the idea that when you go very, very fast, it slows down time, or when you have a very, very heavy object, it's time around it moves slower. And so this made perfect sense, though, because if you're having a lot of calculations taking place, it means that you're going to slow down this. You're going to have to slow down the system, and that all of a sudden, I was able to like understand relativity. This is the basics of it, the concept of that phenomenon. It was profound, and it wasn't somebody explained it to me. I was just thinking about it, and then I just noticed something, and I was like, oh, that kind of is like that, and then made me think about it more, and I was like, then my mind was blown. Like literally, that's an instance where you could say it blew your mind. It's like I went from 1 second I felt I had no understanding of space-time, really. I mean, maybe I thought I did, but I didn't. I could tell you what Michio Kaku tells you about it, but that was it. And but that's being a parrot. That's not actually having understanding. And a few minutes later, I felt like I had a grasp on the on basically like the phenomenon of how matter relates to time, and that how mass relates to time and speed relates to time. That's profound. Profound is I had an increase or a jump in understanding, and my wife said something this week that on our walk, and it was absolutely profound. And so we're going to get to it. But so what things that are profound, what they do is they provide context. Context is information, and it is the critical component of it. It is the most critical of information, because without it, there is no such thing as understanding. And so we were on our walk, and she was talking about, we if you don't know, we had our first child about 9 months ago. She is adorable, and it's been an incredible journey. I mean, I can't even begin to talk about it in the stream. We're going to have to do an entire stream about that again, but it's amazing. I highly recommend, getting married and having kids. It's the most incredible journey you could possibly go on. You want to have a good journey in life that is profound and produces wisdom and is an enormous amount of fun and is incredibly rewarding and also like very, very challenging. Get married and have kids. That will be quite a journey. And so, but we were going for a walk, and she was talking to me about about having kids, and we were talking about how a lot of people today don't want to have kids. And Elon Musk just recently posted, that we're heading towards a population collapse, and that is true, and it is a big problem. It's not going to, God's will be done, but at the same time, it's going to be massively destabilizing to civilization. And so we're talking about it, and she said, today my wife is a very good writer, and she had written um, that if you think life is good, wouldn't you want your children to experience the goodness of life? And then she thought about it more and she changed it from that, from if you think life is good, wouldn't you want your children to experience the goodness of life? Or wouldn't you want to basically it's someone to I guess you could just say your children to experience the goodness of life. You want more people in the world to experience that goodness. But she changed it and she said, if you think God is good, wouldn't you want your children to experience the goodness of God? And that is profound. And I'm going to explain why it's so profound. It's one of the most brilliant things I've ever heard her say, and she's very smart. But that is I've said this before. There are no such thing as a genius person. There's no such thing as a genius person, and there's no such thing as an idiot, an idiotic person. Idiocy and geniusness are moments that everybody has. This was a moment of genius that my wife had, and what's so amazing about this is it completely changes the context of the entire situation. Because the first statement, if you think life is good, wouldn't you want your children to experience the goodness of life? Or wouldn't you want to have children so that they can experience the goodness of life? That statement is limited, okay, to whether or not life feels pretty good at the time, and sometimes life does not feel good. The question you have to ask another question after that is like, what is goodness of life, And most people would just be like, feeling meaningful, fulfillment, happiness, pleasure, success, I don't know, satisfaction, all just bliss. Anything that is a good feeling is what most people would consider, goodness in life. Anything that produces a good feeling. But life is not always like that. Life is often extremely stressful, and it's also filled with moments of, great enjoyment, but it's also filled with moments of extraordinary, pain. And there's the reality. Nobody gets through life without that being the case. And so you can't use that statement to in just any situation, which if you're going to kind of justify or discuss bringing someone into existence or helping that process, then you have to kind of look at this from a kind of a holistic, universal application at the applicability, I guess. And so when you change the statement, though, from if you think life is good, wouldn't you want your children to experience the goodness of life? To if you think God is good, wouldn't you want your children to experience the goodness of God? That changes everything, because you're talking about a someone. And that changes everything. Because a someone has the ability to make choices and has a will. And this is very relevant to this entire project, because sentient singularity theory, the paper that I'm working on, and the theory itself, and which, is the name is part of it, the paper is part of it, the model is a part of it. That's just true with any piece of work. Is that it's the totality of everything that forms that piece of work. And with sentient singularity theory, when you look at this paper, or let's go to my website, right here, sentientsingularity.com. and we go to writings, and you go to technical description of existence, you can see the beginning of the paper that I'm writing. And the very first part of it is sentient singularity theory, the theory of every0ne. And it ends with, sentient singularity theory characterizes the fundamental building blocks of the cosmos to be sentient beings, and that sentience is the universally defining, animating feature of everything in existence. Sentient singularity theory displays that space, time, matter, force, and all other observable phenomena are emergent from the motivations, interactions, perceptions, and cognitive constructs and processes of sentient beings. If sentience is the primary structure of reality, I guess I would update that to say if sentience is the primary nature of reality, or primary nature and structure of reality, then a true, final, ultimate, or master theory that unifies and contextualizes all other scientific theories is more than a theory of everything. It's a theory of every0ne. It's not even just more than a theory of everything, it's a theory of every0ne. It is primarily a theory of every0ne and emergently a theory of everything. And that explainer, that byline in the title, I don't even know what that's called, that secondary part of the title, where you have sentient singularity theory, that's the name, and then kind of the summation of it is the theory of every0ne. It tells you everything. It's ironic to say that, but it tells you everything about the theory, because it tells you exactly what it's about and what its primary proposal is that this is a theory to primarily, explain someone, including yourself, and including God, and including your dog, and including, cells, and atoms, and hadrons, and molecules. It's to explain every0ne. Not, that doesn't mean that, somebody said this on Twitter, this physicist too. This is a physicist that's a working physicist. They said, oh man, I'm probably gonna have to get this up. Gosh, physics is just so lost, but it's also making a lot of progress lately, and I'm very proud of it, or I'm proud of some people in it. But somebody said this. Let's see this here. The more you think about this, the less sense it makes. But this guy said, his name is Andrew Cote. I have no idea who he is, but he's a physicist. He's an engineering physicist. The scary thing about a complete theory of physics is if you can predict the future perfectly, then you can no longer have free will. There's so much wrong with the entire statement. The context of the statement is wrong. It's not even that the statement is wrong. The context of the statement is wrong. It's meta wrong. It's totally wrong. And it's impossible to build anything right on top of that, almost. But this is not supported by my work, even if though I'm proposing what I believe is a theory of every0ne. It is not something that can predict your actions and my actions and the actions of others, and that's because choice is built into the very structure of reality, and that's what is part of my theory. And so, if that's the case, then what a theory of every0ne really is it provides the context of your choices. It shows how to look. What is the objective or super subjective? I guess if you're talking about a fundamental theory of every0ne, where sentience is the primary nature of reality, then it's, I don't know if objective is actually the best term, but it's whatever we usually mean by objective usually means universal. And I guess you could say super subjective, which means like it's from the perspective of everyone, or of the perspective of God. You could ask, it could be defined as either. You just have to pick one. And it's like when I say, what is the truest thing? Yeah, when you ask yourself, what is the truest thing that I know? Everybody who asks themselves that will have the exact same answer if they get it right, which is I am. That's a super subjective answer. It's subjective to you, but it's also universal to everyone. That's what it means to be super subjective. And this importance of context, though, is it's extremely limiting, and it can take something from being almost nonsensical or meaningless or useless, and turn it into something profound and universally applicable, like my wife's statement of, if you think that life is good, then wouldn't you want to bring, other lives into the world to experience life's goodness? And it's like, well, life isn't always feel good. What does it mean for life to be good? It's like it doesn't go anywhere, except now we just have to kind of just deconstruct it and run around in circles as, be headless chickens. Because we don't even know what we're searching for at that point. You're just deconstructing the statement because the statement can't stand. So that's what you do with things that can't stand. You deconstruct them. And with things that can stand, you construct them. It's different. It's very different. Concepts that stand in their own context, or in a super subjective context, are constructive, and they are constructed. They are not deconstructed. They cannot be deconstructed. You can try, but if it's accurate, then you cannot deconstruct it. Like the idea of the truest thing that you know is I am. Try and deconstruct it. I almost want to say that if you try and deconstruct it, you will start to deconstruct yourself, and it will lead you, into a spiral of nonsense. But this statement that she had here, it's universal. This one is not universal, because sometimes life is not good. But this one is universally applicable. It's a universally applicable concept. Is that, and even the lessons that come from this and the insights that come from just thinking more deeply about this statement are profound. It's like profound, truly profound ideas lead to more profound ideas. And this is one of those statements for sure. It's just, it blew my mind, guys. It did. When something blows your mind, it's like, think about it like expansion. It should be like, wow, that's like overwhelming to think about, because there's so much to think about, and I've already started thinking about it, and because I can't help but make the connections that are being made. That's profound. That's mind-blowing. Not, oh, you exist in 11-dimensional hyperspace. Oh man, that makes no sense. You just blew my mind. There's a hilarious video of Pharrell talking to Neil deGrasse Tyson from years ago, and PewDiePie made such a funny observation about it, and he made this video that's very funny. I highly suggest watching it. It's called "I Fucking Love Science," and this is it. But
science. I love science. No. I don't just love science. Fuck you. I fucking love science. My name is PewDiePie. Rick and Morty is my favorite anime. I freaking love science. Christian channel. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is my god.
So the fact
like
that
sperm.
sure, yeah.
I mean, it's science.
The rest.
So funny. Watch this clip down.
Don't.
Where do they go?
They're dead.
There's also the famous one where he talks about time with Pharrell Williams. And time is such an interesting concept to me. Like, I really, that is one of those things that it's almost scary just to think of the concept of time and just because it's something infinite. You would think that's what they talk about in this interview with Tyson and Pharrell Williams, because he has this meme where he goes like, "Wah!" And maybe you've seen it.
So the sun would rise and set, we call that a day. The moon would go around once, we call that a month. It became a month. Earth would go around the sun, that became a year. And these became the natural timekeeping ways. When you wanted to be more precise than just sun up and sun down, you had to invent some machine that could keep more accurate time. You divide the day into parts that are convenient to you.
Look at Pharrell. He's so ready to have his mind blown. He's like, oh my god, it's coming. It's coming. The science fact is coming. Come on, Neil, feed it to me. Feed me the science fact.
So we now keep better time than that. We keep atomic time.
Look at Pharrell's fucking face when he says that. We keep atomic time.
So we now keep better time than that. We keep atomic time. So now we use it's an atomic clock. And you want to have time in
the
space.
atomic clock is really based on like atoms.
Oh yeah. So now you bring the clock into space, and you no longer have to. Yeah, exactly. It's actually based on electrons moving within the atoms, just to be precise. I don't know what frequency that is.
I love how annoyed Neil gets from this. He's just like, shut the hell up, dude.
I don't know what frequency that is.
He didn't even say anything interesting. He just explained atomic clocks is a thing. He didn't explain how it works. He's just like, we use them to tell time. It's more accurate than the sun and the stars.
That's mind-blowing remix.
Is that what that is?
Look, he even points it out himself.
So you bring an atomic clock with you, and you keep good time.
That's so funny. Like, that's not even as bad as the example of, that I gave of, 11-dimensional hyperspace, but it is still like, it's still a great example where it's like, he didn't have anything explained to him. He just said, atomic clocks actually use atoms. Does he know what that even means? Like, no, he doesn't. And yet it's mind-blowing, apparently. But it's not. It's because we're conditioned to think of like atoms and science and black holes and dimensions as these mind-blowing things to hear about. But they're not mind-blowing in the way that they're described to us. Usually they are confusing, and that's it. And this one, it's like so confusing that you don't realize that you're confused. It's like I used to say things all the time and just parrot, string theory talking points when I was in college, because I just would watch, Cosmos to go to sleep, and but I didn't understand any of it really. I just liked it. It was like a bedtime story, that was it. And but I didn't even realize that I didn't understand it. I didn't know what it meant to understand, because that's what I mean by like, what is that which is profound? It is the context gives the context of understanding. It's like if you don't even have the context of understanding, you can't even know what understanding is. And this is just making me think of so many conversations that I'm having with a couple people in my life about just topics that I've put a lot of time and energy into trying to figure out, and I'm trying to figure out how to have a conversation with them that gives them context of my perspective. It's politics, and if you couldn't guess, and you need to give the context to somebody of your understanding of your perspective in order for them to have an understanding of your perspective. And that is something that's difficult sometimes. But yeah, this idea though, the context of this is a someone. And the context of this is something sometime. And this is limited to very specific contexts. This is not. And that is that is entirely changing of how this statement can even be applied, because this doesn't actually do what its intended goal was. My wife was trying to think of, like, why have kids, and this was what she got first, and this is a failure of an explanation. She failed to explain it to herself, and then she realized that she failed, and she tried again, and she succeeded. Because this, like I said, it's almost, when you have something that's a failure, that fails to give context, you almost can't give context to it to explain it, because it doesn't provide its own context. So you have to put it into a specific context, and we're trying to explain it in a universal context when it's actually only applicable to specific context. So you can't do it. So basically failed. And so that's why you need to try and explain goodness. And then you realize, why are we even trying to do this? Because the reality is life isn't always good. If good means feeling good, and if good doesn't mean feeling good, then what does it mean for, why is life good in and of itself? There's no context to this statement, to any part of it, because from a universally applicable perspective, from a super subjective perspective, from an objective perspective, this statement has its own context built into it. This is sincerely hinting, and not even just hinting, it's like it is just showcasing what is the defining characteristic of a universal context. What changes from this to this to make it go from barely applicable and not really even understandable, the more the more you think about it, the less it makes sense, to something that all of a sudden makes sense and is justification for the original, like, goal. It achieves the original goal, which is like, why have kids? It's not the only reason why you would have kids, but it's like, if you think God is good, and God is God, and God is all, powerful within, his own constraints, that he's only constrained by his own constraints, and God is, his will be done, and his will is good, then, and why wouldn't you want your kids to experience that? And if God wants you to have kids too, and you believe that, and you also believe that God is good, then why wouldn't you want to do what this good God wants you to do? And so it's just never, the ability for it to just justify itself, and in a true and solid way, is profound. I feel like I'm not doing the best job of explaining, giving the best example of how to apply this, because it's universally applicable. But hopefully it's a bit intuitive to you to just think about, why does this make sense? Maybe put it in the chat what your first thoughts are when you hear that, because it's applicable to whatever situation you thought of. It's not just whatever ones I think of. It's whichever ones you thought of, and whichever ones I thought of, and whichever ones, everyone thinks of. That's what it means for a statement to be super subjectively true and profound. But how about ethics, logic, morality? Law is written into fabric of our reality, creating the limits on the interaction of good and evil. Law is written into the fabric of our reality, creating the limits on the interaction of good and evil. What is the context that dictates the limits of good and evil. Someone. Of course it's someone, because hierarchies are necessary to provide meaning. Something is good when you should do something because someone who is wiser than you and who is better than you, who is gooder, more good than you, has provided the context that makes that thing good. Like, without that, there is no good. And that's why when you erase God, you erase morality and ethics, and you can try and build up. I know Sam Harris. I never hear much about him anymore. Probably because he deleted his Twitter, but he tries to say that ethics, you can derive ethics by basically, that the goal is to maximize human flourishing of life. The goal of life is to maximize human flourishing of a human life, at least. If that's the case, now we have to define flourishing. And, and why is that a good thing? Just because some human thinks it's a good thing. They're without a fundamental hierarchy that's coming from a being above humans. It's just, it's like, what makes it true? Consensus? No, we know that's not the case. So it just falls apart. It's that you need a foundation, things to be built on a foundation. Anything that's going to be true, like truly true. And that is like morals. Morals are something that is, like you said, it's woven into the fabric of our reality. It's not a soft science. Sociology, morality, economics, politics, they are not soft sciences. They are as concrete as any of the rest of the sciences. The only reason why they don't appear that way is because we're in them. Okay? Imagine if atoms were talking about, if protons and neutrons were talking to each other about quantum mechanics. That's where we're at with sociology, with morality, with economics, with politics. We're atoms or hadrons talking to each other about quantum mechanics. And so it doesn't seem like it's concrete, because your thoughts on it and my thoughts on it are always going to be limited, because we are within, we are not God. There are things outside of us that we are not privy to. And so we always have a limited perspective. And when you take that into account with the fact that, you're inside of a system where everybody's trying to is convinced of and is trying to convince others of what is the truest, facts about life, and then why would I assume that I know everything, and why would I assume, and I shouldn't, because I don't, and why would I assume that you know everything if that's the case? And then if because of that you end up being not able to look at this from like a God's eye view, whereas like if you're looking at atoms interacting, you're looking down multiple levels below you in a hierarchy of sentience. You're not looking out from within. You're looking from the outside, looking in, not or down. I don't know what's the best term for it. I guess it's like a combination of inward and down. But if you're looking out, and you're a cell inside of a body, then it's going to look different than if you are human looking at cells. if you're a human looking at cells, you've got the big picture of what's going on in the interaction that you're observing. It's not the case with when you're inside the system. And so these things appear to be soft sciences because of that. And also humans are at a stage, and I don't want to say that that this stage is unique to this process or this state is unique to our stage, but our stage of sentience, which is like organism, in between, organism and levels above, which, there would be like family above that, and then there's a level above that, which I don't have the best term for it, but I call it just a caste, or you could call it a tribe. Somebody actually came up with a great term for it, but I forgot where I wrote it down. But we're in this state where our instincts are no longer in alignment with our environment, and because of our technological abilities, we've changed our environment, and we've destroyed the context of our instincts that have been molded to be helpful tools and motivating towards goodness and towards growth, are in the right context have now been put into a totally different context that they're not able to adjust fast enough to, because instincts primarily change on a lineage level, and we're on the individual level, so you can't change instincts on an individual level, at least not truly. So you're still going to have the same drives that make you hungry and make you thirsty. The drive that makes you want sugar before you could just go to Walmart and get a billion pieces of candy at once. That drive to have as much sugar as possible was a good thing, because it meant that every time you found a beehive or some fruit, like, you didn't pass it up. You got those nutrients and those calories. That isn't the same context that we're in anymore. We're completely, we're not constrained by our environment when it comes to getting sugar. So now these cravings make us get fat and eat, terribly. And so, this is true of sex. This is true of sugar. It's true of all kinds of things. It's true, like the a lot of instincts that we have as children are in the wrong environment when we're being educated in the school system, because you're sitting in a desk, and those instincts were actually like designed. Those instincts of children to go and break things and test limits, those are for the sake of motivating you to experience as much as possible in order to gain as much wisdom as possible in an early stage. We now cut you off from being able to do that. So this is, context is key. But I want to get back to this idea of like why the context of someoneness is super applicable. And so we're going to, since you brought up morality, who was that? That was D. Since you brought up morality, I was having a conversation about modesty with someone recently, and they were saying that I was basically arguing that bikinis are extremely bad for society. They are, guys. They're horrendous for society. They lead you. I'm not even saying they are actually the start of it, but they're the moment in which how your complete disillusion of modesty has become apparent, and And so somebody was basically, it's just well known by men that like bikinis these days are getting smaller than even what the underwear that women wear. And underwear is supposed to be private, and bikinis are worn in public. Why is that? Oh, that doesn't make any sense. And somebody said, well, it's about context, And I was like, well, would it be okay for, some your daughter, mother, wife to wear their underwear, to work? And they were like, well, no. And I was like, okay, well, what about, walking down the street? No. Okay. Well, then why is bikini okay? And they were just like, well, one's at the beach and it's, that's a different context. And somebody who was even quoted, like, they brought up C.S. Lewis, who talked about morals being, or modesty at least, being contextual to some degree. And there are certain aspects of modesty that are contextual, but in the way that they were thinking, but that's not fundamental, like not modesty in like in a just the concept of modesty, not like, oh, I'm being modest in this circumstance. And I'm not talking about clothing. I'm talking about, like, I don't know, you're just being modest. You're not being braggadocious. There's a context in which sharing something might be conceived of as being braggadocious, and then there's a certain context in which it's like should be sharing it. But that's kind of what they were getting at. That's not the same thing as like modesty as far as how you present yourself to the world every day, just the clothing that you wear. And somebody had said, though, they said, well, the context of the beach is different. And I was like, why is it different? If it's not okay at the office or on the side of the street to be wearing underwear, basically, then why is it okay at the beach? And they basically said, because everybody's doing it, which is never a justification for whether or not something is right or wrong. But it does make it more difficult to see what is right and wrong. But the issue with this whole thing, and this is what I'm getting at, is context does matter, and it does change the situation of whether or not something is good, or modest, or I don't even know if modest is the right word, but if it's appropriate, let's say that, appropriate. And they had said, well, what is the context in which it would be okay to wear a bikini or your underwear around? And the answer, I said, was in front of your husband. And like, the difference is that they're trying to justify whether or not something is appropriate based on the context of something or some place. So some people that I've talked to about this say, okay, it's okay. And this is like one of those, I'm fascinated by the whole, like, just this whole situation of like bikinis. And not just because I'm a man, but also because like it is so obviously like cognitive dissonance in how we are like perceiving what is appropriate. And some people will say, well, it's okay because it's at the beach, and that's, or at the pool, and so it's appropriate because it's a swimsuit, essentially. But then other people are just like, well, it's okay if it's a swimsuit, but it's not okay if it's underwear. If it's a bikini, it's okay, but if it's like a bra and underwear, then it's not okay. And so one of these groups is defining is basing the appropriateness of a moral circumstance or they're basing morality. They're trying to base morality. You can't actually do it, but they're trying to base morality on something, which is like, is it a bikini or is it underwear? What is it labeled as when you buy it? Doesn't matter. The shape is the same. And then the other side is trying to justify this based on some place. And space-time is not where morals come from. We need to go somewhere more fundamental. We need a more fundamental context to define our morals. So what's a more fundamental context that is the true context? Someoneness. That is the most fundamental context. That means that what changes whether or not something is appropriate is who you are doing it with. And so if you're wearing a bikini in front of people who are not, your husband, it's not appropriate. But if you're wearing it in front of your husband, it's appropriate. And there's just no way that you can get around that. So there's really 2 degrees of freedom in here. Is like, either it's okay to basically wear nothing, and it's appropriate to wear nothing if you want. And I'm not going to necessarily, I think that in the context of society, that is evidently not the case anymore. But I do think that there was a context where that was true. In hunter-gatherer times, in the garden, it was fine. But as soon as you leave the garden and you create your own world, where you lost the constraints that you once had, and then it's different. And you change the context of your instincts. And if you've changed the context of your instincts, then you might have to also change the context of certain moralities. And so, but this is not, this is true to everything. It's, if you think about like sharing some type of intimate thought. I'm not talking about intimate in just meaning sex. I mean just like something that is private, some information that about a situation that is, maybe not yours to share or something like that, with the world. Is it appropriate to share those things with people? Well, it depends on the people. Like it's not about, is something is not appropriate to share outside of, in the woods, but is appropriate to share inside of an apartment. Like that doesn't make any sense. It doesn't change anything. It's about who you're sharing it with. That's what it's about. That's what makes something appropriate. That's so our morals, what makes something moral is a context of someoneness. And so sometimes when you change the someone, it is a change of context, and it would change the morals. But sometimes you can't change the context because the context of it is everyone. It's like murder. It's like, when is murder justifiable? It's not. It will deconstruct itself because it doesn't. It's destructive. It's not constructive. And if you take it to its logical, extreme of like justifying that, it completely deconstructs. It's not even that like, oh, now it's just okay for everybody to murder. No. It's like there's not even a point to murder anymore if you start like really deconstructing that a bit. It's like when people say that a lot of anti-theists or atheists will adopt a perspective of not, I don't want to say hedonism, but what is it, where you're just, the goal is to just seek to do what you want, but it's not hedonism like chasing pleasure. It's like gosh, what's the so it's Ayn Rand philosophy. What was it called? I think she was like, it's related to Ayn Rand, or people talk about it with, what was it? Let's see, comment it in the chat if you know. Objectivism. Yeah, I'm blanking on it right now. But if you know what I'm talking about, just comment it. Hopefully it comes to me at some point. But it's just the philosophy of you should do what you want, essentially. But it's not the philosophy of just pure pleasure seeking. It's not hedonism. And I guess objective. No. Dang. But it's it ends up being self-defeating. It's like, why even do that? Why even live? Why even die? You know, why? If people say things like, if life is meaningless, why don't you just kill yourself? It's like, if life is meaningless, why would you kill yourself? It doesn't make any sense. There's no answer to this. It's completely self-destructing. You cannot define morals outside of the context of someoneness, and a hierarchy as well. Hierarchies, fundamental hierarchies, like hierarchies that are there's like morality, which is like based on fundamental hierarchy. And so what is good for your cells to do, what is moral for your cells to do, is what is best for you. It's not what they think is best for them. If they start doing that, they're going to go cancerous. And but if they do what is best for you, that's what's moral. Because guess what? If they don't do what's best for you and they go cancerous and then you die, they're going to die. It was their limited perspective that didn't allow them to see the big picture. And because of that, or that maybe it did and they just made a choice that was nonsensical. But I don't even know why you would do that. Because it's kind of self-destructing. But if they don't prioritize you and your desires, not your desires, but your I guess goals or well-being, then above their own goals and desires, then they're going to not make it anyways, because their success is contingent upon yours. That's a fundamental hierarchy. A non-fundamental hierarchy is like the king ordered you to do it, or the court ordered you to do it, and we have like this shared agreement with each other that we're going to follow as much of these rules as possible that we kind of set with each other in the attempt to move towards morals, towards a more moral society. We are going to follow a certain ethic. It's like ethics is just a mode of it's just an agreement. It's different than morals, but we associate people who are ethical, like if I say he's an ethical person, with being a moral person. That's you can be very law-abiding and do horrible things, and you can also break the law to do something good. And so they're not exactly the same, but there is some overlap there, and there should be. That's the point of ethics. The goal of ethics is morals. That's what it is. You could say is that ethics is the goal of the adoption of ethics is to achieve morality, is to guide towards morality. And yeah, it's different. There's no objective morality if there isn't a central figure that the morality isn't based on. Exactly. Like it has to be based on the will and well-being of the fundamentally central figure that we're all built on, and that we're all constrained within, which is God. We're all built on God. We're all constrained within God. And so that's the going to be the context of that. So anyways, let me see here. what's next? Pattern chasing. Can get into that. If things are in a vacuum, then everything is based on moral relativism, which means there's no absolute good or evil. It makes perfect sense. Yeah, good. But next, I guess we'll just talk about pattern chasing. But you can ask me anything in the chat. This is going to be pretty, I guess, just informal. Sometimes I like to do those. But we're going to look at some patterns and how symmetry structures are guiding. And so this is a cosmological verse. This is the complete, essentially, this is the completed, the summation of all the models of sentient singularity theory put together. They build on each other. There's 4, essentially. There's a model of creation or cosmogenesis. There is the 4 primary perspectives that form the quantum of consciousness, which is this calculating 3x3 matrix. And then they form to this right here. And so this entire thing, this entire process is done by looking at symmetry structures and finding the symmetries that are inescapable. And so what often happens in math with this is you can change the equation and still get the same answer. And so that's what, happens with a lot of within these models that I have with them creates these values, is that even if you change the exact equation, so this is this plus this, but if you change it, but it's still, you do it, you make that change in a symmetrical manner, then you're going to end up getting the same answer. Now, I could go in there completely outside of context with no symmetry chasing, just, go in and change the answer to whatever I want. And I could just, I don't know, write equals this plus, I don't know, that. And it's like, you just changed that, but outside of context. So what the context is that is the fundamental context in mathematics is symmetry. And you see this when you're learning algebra and they tell you that whatever you do to this side of the equation, you have to do to that side of the equation. And that's true of metaphysics as well. And you end up seeing that when you're looking for symmetries. But the other part of this that you are trying to do is you're trying to construct. So you're trying to start from one input and build symmetrically. So here you have 0, and then it's not an arbitrary of what you pick to start with. You have to start with 1. That's just the starting place of all places. Like you start with yourself, your someoneness. God is someone, and anything that is defined is one thing. Like it's inescapable. Like I said, any of these fundamental and super subjective concepts are inescapable concepts, and they need to be recognized. But so when I was doing this, people often accused me of just pure, pattern chasing, essentially. And here's the thing. Pattern chasing is something that you have to do. You have to chase patterns. That's what we do when we think about anything. Try and think about something without chasing pattern. You can't. But there is a point in which I would say that pattern chasing becomes I guess it becomes purely pattern chasing, where it's no longer constructive. And this occurs in everything. This occurs in politics, and there are instances that I could get into where this is very obvious. I don't think I'm going to do that on a live stream right now because I don't want to get throttled, even though it's like 5 people watching. But you can apply this to anything. And the way in which you avoid just pattern chasing that doesn't go anywhere is by having a goal. And a goal that you set is providing of context to the chasing of patterns. There's nothing wrong with pattern chasing. It's whether or not you're pattern chasing with a goal that has to, that gives meaning to the pattern chasing. That doesn't mean you can't accidentally stumble on something when you're pattern chasing without a goal. And I do that sometimes, but that's like, I recognize when I'm doing that too. It's like different than, that's not how you build something. It's not, you don't build by doing that. You might notice something and stumble on something, and then you can use that to build later, but it doesn't, the issue with it is that it usually doesn't provide much context. So for instance, open sentient singularity theory model. So if we want to just pattern chase, this, I'll just show you what I was kind of chasing earlier, but what I was doing earlier. This is just chasing patterns a little bit. And, but it's not just chasing patterns entirely at this point, because what I'm really looking for is I'm looking for quantities and relationships that are also already found in all of these structures, okay, that have already been built. And so if I was just looking for patterns in this without not just looking for patterns here, I'm looking for the patterns that are here in here. So it's a little different, but this, you can do this where you're just mathematically exploring, like looking at, if I do this to this, and then I do this to that, then what does that end up, doing when I put those two things together? And you'll actually find some pretty amazing patterns, especially if you start trying to do things symmetrically. You'll start to see quantities pop up again and again and again, and you won't know though why. And that's the thing. And so because I know why they occur here, essentially, maybe not all the reasons why, but some of the reasons why. Because when you're talking about fundamental reality, there's always multiple reasons simultaneously that are, multiple reasons that are simultaneous for one thing. So this is what I call like super literal when we're talking about like scripture or something. It's very similar to that, where it's like, is it metaphorical? Is it historical? Is it predictive? Is it prescriptive? Is it I don't know, I don't know, I guess like mathematical? Yeah. Is it legal? I mean, there's so many different ways in which you can look at scripture, and it ends up being true in all those ways, if you're looking at it from the kind of in the correct context of someone, essentially. And but it's not right to just say, well, scripture is metaphorical, or scripture is historical, or scripture is prescriptive or predictive. It's like, it's all of them. And so this is a concept that is more fundamental than what we currently call math. And because what it really is it's about relationships. And, we have geometry, people call it geometry. Geometry is just, you're combining the concept of relationships with the concept of quantity. And okay, now you got geometry. So it's built on the concept of quantity, but if you take this out of the context of someone, then you've lost the meta-mathematical meaning of it, I guess. So this is very tough to explain. And like I said, this is very informal, so don't, hold me to what I'm saying here. I'm kind of like working, and I've been a lot of this, I will just say, is when you're doing work that is that you're actually breaking some ground on some things that are not currently being, I guess, discovered or by many people around you, you end up just doing a lot of this work alone, and that has its own issues, and people will say, well, it's very easy to go crazy. That can be true, but it's also not. I think Kurt said, quoted this. Who was it? Some philosopher, I think, had said that Nietzsche went crazy because he wasn't grounded. Like, he didn't have a family and wife and kids. I have a family and wife and kids, and they definitely keep me grounded. But so that having that context of someone, to ground you is gonna means that you're a little bit more free to like go and look at patterns, and it also keeps you a bit more humble, but self-critical. But the real problem with working alone is it's difficult to describe what you are working on, because you're not speaking to anybody. Like, you see it and you do it, but you don't tell anyone. And with a fundamental theory, it's even worse, because you have to know the context of sentient singularity theory for me to explain, for a lot of the things that I say to make sense. Because that's what you need for anything to make sense, is the context of it. And if you're working on a fundamental theory, then it is its own context. So it's a reconfiguration of the context that is the mainstream context in the academic scientific world, at least, not in the theistic world. But that's the biggest problem, is being able to figure out how to explain it. And it's an enormous amount of effort. It takes an enormous amount of effort. And I appreciate everybody who listens to these streams, and where sometimes I just ends up a stream like this. But because it's helpful to me, actually. And to talk to people about it. Let's see here. But I'm trying to think of, like, how do I explain to you what I'm seeing here? Like, what am I... I'll just try and walk through what I was doing. So basically what I did, I'm trying to just find a pattern that is here already inside of another aspect of this structure. So there are patterns that go into the construction of this that are, you could say, structurally present. So like where the cells are, how many, the count. We're talking about the count of the cells and the placement of the cells. That's what I mean by structurally present. But then there's patterns that are arithmetically present, which is, or mathematically present, which is like they're in the calculations and in the quantities that are within the cells. So there is the structure that contains the information, that is the contextualizer of the information, and then there's the information within it, and they're kind of inseparable. And so I was looking for patterns that I know occur in other places within the values that are calculated here, because I'm trying to understand what these values are about. And I know what some of them are about, but I don't know what all of them are about. And that leads to, you trying to look at it in different ways. So I have all these different models that I break the structure down symmetrically. So here is, 1 all the way out. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I color grade it so that I can actually physically see it. This one goes all the way out to the create the biggest squares possible. So there's 2 of them within here, which actually lines up with double helix structure. I've talked about it on here before. We'll talk about it again. This is the biggest square you can make, and this is the biggest square you can make. You can't make one biggest square because you'll exceed the bounds. So you end up realizing that there's 2. And so it goes 1 all the way to 10, and then also from this center out and from the outside in simultaneously. I've got 1 going in and 1 going out simultaneously. Looking at symmetry patterns. Here, looking at more symmetry patterns, just breaking it down. Finding the center. The center of the structure is 4 cells. There is no singular center that is 1. That's very profound because it makes perfect sense and lines up with it's exactly what you would expect when you are working on this model, because it starts with 4 primary perspectives that are like the very beginning of this entire piece of work. You have to know what I'm talking about with my work to probably follow along right now, but if you don't know, then my entire work is built on these 4 primary perspectives: inside, outside, separate, and oneness, that are conceptually entangled. So if I say, oh, I understand that something is inside of something else, it implies that you already also simultaneously understand what it means for something to be outside of something, and also something to be one with something and something to be separate from something, because to be inside of something is to be separate from something, and to be outside of something is to be separate from something. But and if something's one with something, then it's within it. And if something is separate from something, then it's outside it almost. And so you can see here, inside means separate and oneness, outside means separate from oneness. And so they're all co-defining, and they're all simultaneously perceived. They are the foundation of every single observation and perception and conception that exists. That's what they are. And that leads to this model, which is just a model of symmetrical information growth, starting from 1, because you have to start from 1. And then from there, you continue the symmetries and you get this one that we're talking about, which is the cosmological verse. So but then when you're looking at the symmetries here, if you're going to look at like structural symmetries, you can do it like here and here. That's what I'm doing. That's why I color grade them. You can see, just all different. Here I've got the same thing going on. I'm looking at the symmetries here by kind of summing what the entire rows are on going up and down or going across. And then I'm looking to see what is this thing that I'm looking at. I'm building a picture. That is part of the purpose of pattern chasing is to perceive and to build a picture. And then there's pattern chasing with a goal, which is even more specific. But sometimes the goal is just to see and to get a better view. And so that's kind of what this entire tab is for, is to get a view of this structure. And what I then did today, just because I was curious, is I copied all of these values, because my goal is to try and figure out what are these values representing. I see where they occur in this scaling of sentience, but why do they occur there? And there's a lot going on here, so I'm trying to simplify it. So what I did is I copied all the values, and then I deduped them and deduped them and deduped them, and what I got was these values. That's it. Okay? These right here. And we can just start looking at them. How many are there? 19. Fascinating. Why is that fascinating? For so many reasons. But you have to know how this was constructed to know why that's fascinating. This was constructed by doing 9 of the preceding models. It's by building a structure of 9 by 9 of those of this right here, this quantum of consciousness model. And whenever you're looking at things kind of fundamentally within the context of someone, you're trying to represent it numerically, you have to always add 1 at the end, because you have to say like, and me, or and God. And so like, it's like everything out there and me. Okay. Plus 1. Or if you're trying to think of this from a God's eye view, you're like all of creation plus me. So plus 1. And it's interesting that you see this even in like the Fibonacci sequence. You'll see like 1 and then 1 and then it's like 2 and then, it continues on. But like right here, this is the Fibonacci sequence is just a fundamental growth sequence, basically. It's you get 1 and 1 and then 2 and then 3, and it's just growing based on itself. It's like self-supporting. There's no other way to get any other numbers. Like you can change things and you could be like, oh, well, 1 and 3, and then you like change the values. But that's not really the most fundamental representation of what's happening. It's these values and only these values. Reason being is because you're representing 1, starting from 1 and basically building on itself. So you're building on oneself. To build on oneself is to build the next level, which would be down here on top of 1 at the top. So it's just a fundamental constraint of fundamental reality, which is someone's, is that you always have to add 1 at the end, because you are there's always you have to add the 1 for the perceiver. But this model here, where is it, of the cosmological verse was constructed by doing 9 by 9 and then entangling them, first here, then here, then here, and then it just like overlapped, and you end up like creating new information, and this is what you get. And I've talked about it in other streams. I'm not going to get too into it here, but this structure it's a 9 by 9 structure and 1. You always have to be like, and 1, and the whole. Okay? And so when you're looking at fundamental reality or things fundamentally, you're going to get these symmetry structures that are everywhere. Like I've said, symmetry is the constraining context of supersubjectivity, is that it's universal. And so when you're talking about fundamental reality, it's fundamentally universal. It's like it is going to transcend your silly little spaces of and definitions. So you're going to have what I call supersubjective, or you're going to have what I call extra arithmetic symmetries taking place, which is when symmetries occur not just in the math, but they occur in the structure of the math and in the way that we have in the symbols of the math, and in every aspect of it that you could possibly look at. And so an instance of this is like this structure, which, by the way, the sum of this structure is 19. Why is that interesting? Because when you get to this point, it's when growth, which is multiplication, simultaneous multiplication and addition, reaches a point in which it's the value that you've calculated is reflective of the structure that the value was calculated within. So that's when you reach the end point of this. This is a 3x3 grid. It calculates to a 3x3. Okay? It's an extra arithmetic symmetry. It's not nonsense. Fundamental reality transcends your little bounds, like your little like fences that you put up between math and symbolism and linguistics and morals. No. This is, you're gonna see this everywhere if you start looking at a truly fundamental structure. You're gonna see that. So also another symmetry here is this structure has a count of 9. Okay, and so you ask, how many squares are there here? Well, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 9 and 1, because they're all contained within that. So how many squares are there? There's 1 and 9. Wait, and you look at the sum inside, it's 19. This is like an extra arithmetic symmetry again. It's that the structure, the count, you're witnessing a symmetry between the count of a structure, the structure, I guess I could just say we'll just say the count of the structure for the sake of this, me not being able to find the right words, the count of the structure and the sum of the structure, right? So that's a symmetry. This is a symmetry. There's countless more symmetries in here, but to continue this up, the reason why why I did 9 by 9 is you start with 1, and when you go 1 by 1 and you do it symmetrically, like truly symmetrically, you go 1 by 1, which is also 1 by 1, because fundamentally you can't just do 1 by 1. It's not like perfectly balanced. You're not square anymore. So you're like, this structure emerges, the symmetry of it has to be simultaneously expanding. So 1 turns to 4, turns to 9, because it's 1 by 1, 2 by 2, 3 by 3. So one sentient singularity contains 4 primary perspectives within going through a 9-step process of information, information processing. And then that is within the greater structure that is the totality of the universe that we live in, and all the sentient beings and their relationships within it, which then is that. So this, you bump it up to like 9 by 9, but it's not. Like I said, you get an overlap and you get like 18, because you overlap them and new information is generated. So you get an additional one. So if you have 9 by 9, then and those 9 overlap each other, and then a new one is created, a new constraint is created between the two. So there's like 2 degrees of freedom plus an intrinsic constraint. You're going to generate a new bit of information between them. It's like past, present. There's the past and there's the future, and where they overlap is the present. And so when you say past and future, you intrinsically must recognize and perceive that there is a present, because what defines the past is the present, and what defines the future is the present. That which is the future is that which has not happened yet, or is not happening currently. That which is the past is that which already happened and is no longer happening currently. That currently is intrinsically perceived between the two, past and future. This is this pattern occurs in all these different instances of sense making. So you could say forwards and backwards, and current, location. It's like, what is your location? Well, like it is dictative of what is, and defining of what is forward and what ahead of you, and it is defining of what is behind you, is your current location. And so this is what happens here. But what's interesting is that when you start looking at this and you realize that there's 8 stages in this of sentience, of the growth of sentience. There's 8 periods in the periodicity of sentience. Essentially, there's 4 stages because those 4 stages are between these 8 periods, essentially, and these 8 periods are on the outside of those 4 stages. It's the same exact thing that I'm talking about in terms of like the present is between the past and the future, because an organism is an assembly of cells. So there's an overlap between an organism and cells, and a family is an assembly of organisms. So there's an overlap between family and organism. So they're literally overlapping. You can see conceptually how these are overlapping. You have to structurally overlap them, and that leads to mathematical, generativity, or quantitative generativity is what you get when you have like perceptual overlap. It's like when I tell you, okay, I'm going to give you a time in the future and a time in the past, and I can, you could derive what is the present if I say 3 hours from now, and you are like, okay, well, or you could say 6 o'clock is 3 hours from now, and that means the future, and you're gonna think about going kind of backwards from the future to the present, and you can also kind of do this if I give you like if I said, what time is it? If you asked what time is it now, and I was like, it is 3 hours past 2. It's like, okay, what time is it? It's 5. So I'm really struggling to explain this, but I hope it's coming across a little bit, is that we contextualize our world according to a specific pattern always. And the pattern is this binary triality pattern of differentiation and organization into a hierarchy, or into a causal hierarchy. So it's like your mind has to take every bit of information and then go through this process of differentiation, which is a binary, and then also have this trialic component to it, which is, the organization of the perception of it within a hierarchy of causality, essentially. And you kind of lose the ability to perceive time. If I said you no longer can perceive the present, you can only perceive the future and the past, that doesn't make sense. It will break your mind. You need all 3 of those touch points, and you can't not have them. It's just built into the nature of reality, because you're looking at a goal, and you are one being, and you're looking at a goal that is distinct from your current state, and this leads to basically you having the perception of your current state, the state that you want to be in, plus the action between the two that you have to take. And so if we look at like oh man, where is it? Information change. So if we're going to count like the changing of information within context in a matrix, let's say we want to change, the goal is to change from this matrix, ones surrounding a straight diagonal line of zeros, to this, which is the precise opposite, where it's like ones crossing through a center of a matrix surrounded entirely by zeros. It's literally a reversal. You want to change all the zeros to ones and all the ones to zeros. You have to go through a specific process in order to do that. And that process is this process. And it is divided into, your perceptions are divided into two different conceptions. And those two different conceptions that you are perceiving are a state and an action. So here's the starting state, here's the second state, the next state, and between them there is an action. The action is you changed this, and then you are this. Then there's an action, then there's the state, then there's an action, and then there's the state. And you can divide this up and look at this in different ways. So what you end up with, in order to change it all while keeping coherence, which means like keeping the context of all consistent and only changing the one in which you're changing, you end up with 17 states and 16 actions, which is very interestingly for a 4x4 matrix, 33 perspectives, and not a coincidence. Or if you just want to look at this from a kind of a quantum mechanics point of view, or God's eye view, where you were perceiving of the system as a whole as an outsider, and you want to change it while maintaining coherence, you can change all ones at once and then change all zeros at once. And you can do it in 4 states and 3 actions. And that is true always, no matter how big the matrix is. But depending on how big the matrix is, it does change the amount of states and actions if you're changing it by not allowing for a superpositional perspective, which is like, this is a superpositional perspective. I have a short video on my YouTube channel that you can watch that's 1 minute long that literally is animated showing this and explaining it. But it's very interesting that like what we're seeing is, let's go to a 2x2 matrix. What do you end up with? Here you end up with, to change from this to this, you end up with 5 states and 4 actions. So to go from a matrix of 4 states, I guess, or 4 bits, I guess. Yeah, bits, 4 bits. To completely change all the information within it, which is right here. That's this, not this. This is using a superpositional perspective. This is what you can do it from the outside looking in. You can't do that if you're inside it. But if you're inside it, you want to change all the information. If you're inside an information system, this is how you have to do it. And what you end up with from these 4 bits is 9 perspectives. Scale it up 1. So now we're doing a 3x3 grid. 3x3 matrix. You, to change all the information from this to this, you go through all these. State, action, state, action, state, action. Count is 10. Count is 9. 10 states, 9 actions, 19. So, just so we're clear, you're basically going from 1 to 4 to 9 to 19 to 33. And this would be 1. This would be 2. because this is a 1 by 1 matrix. This is a 2 by 2 matrix. This is a 3 by 3 matrix. This is a 4 by 4 matrix. To change a 1 by 1 matrix, this is how many like steps you go through, essentially. To change a 2 by 2 matrix, this is how many steps. Wait. I confused myself with this. So 1 is 1 by 1, 2. Oh, I see why this is confusing, because these are separate. This is distinct. So this is a little different because there's 4. Like a 1 by 1 matrix is, it's not even a matrix. It's like it's just a little different. This 4 is me looking at basically this, which is like the beginning of a matrix. The first matrix you can make is like 2 by 2. You can't really make a 1 by 1 matrix. There's no change that can really take place. You can't change a 1 by 1 matrix because, remember, you have to change according to the context in this model. So if there are no zeros, then you can't change to zeros because there's nothing to define 0 fundamentally. So if I said, okay, how do you change a 1 by 1 matrix into this, this matrix right here? How do I change this to 0? You'd be like, in one step, just by going like that. It's like, no, actually, you can't even change it. You can't, because there is no 0. So you can't change to that which, doesn't exist. There's no differentiation. The 0 doesn't, I'm not using the 0 as a quantity representation or the 1 as a quantitative representation. I'm using them just to symbolically show similarity. So, and differentiation. So this, I'm saying this is different from this. This information is the same internally as this, but it is contextually, structurally in a different place than this, but it's the same internal, information. This, same with this and this, but this is different internal information from this. So that's what the 1s and 0s mean. You could do, A's and B's and be fine. That still would work. I'm just using 1s and 0s because it's easy. So here we're finally at you're at a place where there's differentiation, is when there's a 2 by 2 matrix. So 2 by 2 matrix. Let's do this. 2, 3, 4. I think that is, what is that? 4 is the 33. So, boom. Watch this. This is actually fascinating. So you can't do a 1 by 1 matrix, so there's a gap. That's why there's a gap here. And this 9, 19, 33. I almost want to like separate this too, because it's just like, I'm just thinking, separating these for the sake of like conceptualizing what's happening here, because these 3 are similar, and then this one is all by itself. 1 by 1 matrix is just 1 bit, and but then we've got 2 by 2 matrix, which has, this is the amount of change that I guess of perspectives within each number. It's like within a 2 by 2 structure. This is what this means, is that in a relationship based fundamental structure that is 2 by 2, essentially, you have 9 perspectives contained within that. In a relationship structure where it's 3 by 3, you have 19 perspectives contained within that. Within a relationship structure that's 4 by 4, you have 33. What's fascinating about this is that when you look at, just to look at more symmetries, and again, remember that when you're talking about fundamental reality, there's endless symmetries that you're going to find. So you have to, like, there's some that are going to be useful, and then there's a point in which you just like stop fractaling out. But here, with this information growth structure, it ends with when it calculates 33 on the outside as the exterior sum, which is also the exterior structure. And then within it, it's 19, which is the sum, which is calculated if you sum everything inside. And then what's interesting about that is that is the interior structure. The interior structure is 9 cubes within, or 9 squares within 1 square. So it's 9, 8, and 1. That's the interior, perspective. That's the amount of perspectives within this structure. Okay, it's 1 and 9, but it's like that symmetry manifests also as within the symbolism of how we represent 1 and 9. And same thing here with 3 by 3, representing a 3 by 3. Just fascinating. And then, so you're going, 1 sentient singularity contains 4 primary perspectives. Okay. From there, you build this structure, which is a 3 by 3 structure that the interior, basically like final stage, when it's the final interior computation, I guess, and ends in is a 4 that gets calculated, which is interesting because it's like what is within this and what is built. This is built within, I guess is a better way of putting it. This is built within is these 4 primary perspectives. So there's another symmetry. When you look at the information change structures here, you're seeing the exact same freaking numbers in the exactly where you would expect them. So you're seeing this 1, and starting from 1, and then the very first time that you do a matrix at all, you're generating this quantity of 4 essentially within it, and so that's not the same as that. Let's move this over as these, and then you're finally able to start this process, and you end up getting the same exact values. Is like within a 3 by 3 matrix, which is right here, and you're trying to get from this to this. These are the steps that you go through. You sum these, that's 10. You sum these states and actions, that's 9. You sum the 2, that's 19. So within a 3 by 3 matrix, there's 19 perspectives observed. There's 1, you can also say there's 1 and 9 perspectives observed. Well, guess what? If we go over here, within a 3 by 3 matrix, there's 19 bits of information that are able to be perceived, because that's the sum in this growth model. And you're also able to, from a structural level, see 1, the whole, and 9. Okay? Again, it's exactly what you would expect. It's not what I'm doing. is not it's not subjective, it's super subjective. It's not arbitrary, it's universal. This right here, this structure, is crazy as it might be to think about it as it just not being, me choosing what values to go there. I did not choose any values. There's no choice in how to build this. You just build based on symmetry. Everything has to, whatever you get here has to do the same thing here. So here, you symmetrically sum these to get this. That means this one, you have to symmetrically sum these to get this. And you get the same thing. And here, this has to be a symmetrical summation as well. So you can, right here, you have to have two things in order to sum two things. So how do you take two things that are the preceding bits of information and sum them? What do you get? There's only one way to do it. This one plus this one, where you get 2. And so this 3 is right there through the center. But you can also do it by going equals this plus, the start, and equals this plus the start. And it's this, you'll get the exact same thing. And you're always summing 2. It's not, you can't be like doing summing 3, because you're to add something to something else is to build on like the concept of differentiation, which is a duality. But and then these are just adding as you go across, and then these are multiplying as you go up. And when you sum these two, you get that 33. So you look at this, a different way to perceive fundamental information, which these models, these are incredible. They're almost easier to understand than this, but this one allows you to build a cosmological verse, and these also do, but it's less. It's just different. So what's interesting is that if we do a 4x4 matrix, because we're recognizing that like the fundamental starting point that you have to start with when you are perceiving anything is inside, outside, separate, and oneness. So the 4 primary perspectives. So let's just do like 4. But it doesn't matter. You can do 2x2. You could do 3x3. You can do 9x9. You could do 102x102. As long as it's symmetrical, it doesn't matter. And if you're going to change these according to the kind of superpositional perspective, or the God's eye view state that you can do here, where it's like a hack, you get the same amount every time. So what do you get? You get a count of 7, but it's really 4 states and 3 actions. And so if we go here and we're going to look at the universe, and we're contextualizing it as within the context of someone, and not just someone as in one person, but 2 at a minimum, because that's what we're looking at, is the structure between us and someone else, us and God, God and us. That means that you have to go through this process twice of changing, of like they call like a double cover in physics. It's like you have to get back where you started, you have to completely change and then completely change back. So, and to get a complete view means like to see everything beyond you by looking out, and also everything, looking at things from the outside in and the inside out at the same time, basically. And so that's what this is showing, is that you are going through like this process, and notice there's 3 values here, 1, 2, and 0. It's the same exact thing that I was doing over here. I was just, instead of 3, I used this symbol, but it's like I said, these are symbolic. They could be A, B, and C. It doesn't matter. A, B, and 0, whatever you want. A, B, and exclamation point. But when you go through that pattern, you change everything here from and but to do that twice, you get basically like this amount of the count, I guess. This is very difficult to explain. But if you sum this, look what happens. You will get 720. Yep, count 720. If you do that with this structure, you place it in the context of the system that it's built to represent, which is a universe. It's coming from someone and leading to someone, so you have to add 1 cell on top and 1 cell at the bottom. Then you will get 720 every time. It's the same exact structure. Here though, you have it being framed by like if you're going to look at like the central framework, you could say there's 4 sides. There's 1 side here, 1 side here, 1 side here, 1 side here. If you want to look at it from the inside out, you say there's that 4-sidedness, that four frame is still present. It's 4 cells as the center. And so there's 4 cells that define the center, which means there's 4 sides to this structure. And you can also see 1, 2, 3, 4. It's the same looking at it from the inside out, outside in. If you're going to do that with the information, like an information change matrix, then you're going to do a 4x4 structure, because that's how you're defining the interior of it, like the framing of it. This whole thing is framed based on like these are the building blocks. They are the framework. And so what you another reason why you would probably choose that is that it's at a 4x4 matrix that you end up basically here, which is you're getting like when you're putting it into the context of a calculative system, which instead of a change system, which you're with a change, they're basically 2 different ways of looking at the same structure. Is this what I'm showing? It's like you could look at it like to look at all of this, to look at this and this and this and this. All of this information is all contained within this structure. But the symmetries continue because this is 1 and 9 structurally. It is 19 internally. You do, and we did this by going, remember, 1 by 1, one sentient singularity. Within it is 4 primary perspectives, which is 2 by 2. Then you go through the actions, the model, the action model, essentially. So this is like the being model, which is oneness. You don't have to do anything fancy. Just have one symbolic representation of, I could just say this. I can represent this by just going, instead of like that, I could just go. like this is probably the best way to do it. I. You have one I that perceives 4 primary perspectives simultaneously and conceptualizes, which is like information processing, to conceptualize in a 3x3 structure here, this quantum of consciousness model, which ends up being self-reflective, because to conceptualize something is to conceptualize it to fundamentally conceptualize something is to conceptualize it in the context of someone, which is the self always. So basically, like this is why this is like a self-reflective structure, and that's when it ends. So you've contextualized the exterior calculated information within the context of the structure that calculated. So 3x3 calculates 3x3. 4 is the ending interior of this value of this computation or conceptualization, which is basically built on, the 4 primary perspectives here. And this then scales up, and you do 9 by 9 basically. And to do this, well, that's how I did it. I actually don't think that's like the best way to do it. But what's interesting about this is that this interior 19, which is also 1 and 9, is also present here, though. Because if we want to look at it and look at the symmetries and say, what is the biggest square that we can make within here? This one. And this one. It's 2, and they're overlapping. Wow. Exactly what you would expect. When we're talking about perceptions of, beings and in relationships between beings fundamentally, it's like, there's families and there's organisms and there's cells, and an organism is the overlap between cells and families. And, a family is the overlap between an individual and a caste, essentially, or a tribe. So you're seeing that structure here, but how big are these squares? The count 19 by 19. What are the odds of that? Probably 100%. And so the interior count is now 19. So it's like alternating. It's like the sum is 19 in the previous one, the count is 19 in this one, and then you keep getting this like flip-flopping of the symmetries happening, which is exactly what you would expect, because you're reflecting each time. You're reflecting when one reflects on themselves, they perceive the 4 primary perspectives. When you reflect on yourself, you're like, if I say reflect on yourself, your selfness, like yourself in what way? Your selfness. Okay? I am myself, which is distinct from you. And I'm one self, I'm my own one self, which is separate from you. And I am, you are outside of me, and I am inside of myself, essentially, like my beingness is inside of, my mentality is inside of my consciousness is inside of my mind, I guess you could say. And so it's like you're reflecting on yourself through the perception of inside, outside, separate, and oneness. You're orienting. So when a singular self reflects on itself, it perceives 4 primary perspectives. Fascinating. When that is reflected on, again, you get conceptualization. So this is the model of, I guess you could say, this is perception. This is perception. This one would be conception. conception. And this one would be, what is a term for it? I don't know. Central figure is God. Yes, that's true. The central figure is God, and this within, from your perspective though, the central figure is God and you, but God is the one that is the super central figure, because he's the center of everyone, and you're the center of yourself, but not. And so is God. You're both the center of God is the center of you, and you are the center of you. But God is the center of everyone, and you're not the center of everyone. Only God is. So God takes priority. So I guess it would be maybe inception, perception, conception, and I don't know, reception for the next one. I'm gonna think about that. That's fascinating. But so you see those symmetries alternating. It's like first it's the sum of the previous model, and then it's the count of the next one, and then it's the sum of the next one, and then it's the count of the next one. And so that makes perfect sense though. That's what happens when you're reflecting. It's the same but opposite. So, but I'm curious. A 2x2 matrix is 9. So basically 2x2 is 9, 3x3 is 19, 4x4 is 33, and the sum of them all is 61, and then you have to add 1. And depending on what you're trying to do, you could add another one sometimes, but because you're thinking about God and you or something like that, but it depends on your goal. Interesting, though. I think you have to maybe, I guess it would just be 1 perception and 1 sum. Oh man, guys, that's exactly what you would kind of expect. 72 with a count of 8. Dang. And an average of 9. That sounds like, wow, he's just picked that number out of his ass. No, actually, I'm looking to see, like, okay, well, if this is complete, like, let's add, 1 and 1. What do you get? 72. 72 represents completeness in like scripture and stuff too, and but that's not why I know that that's true, but it is true, and I know that that's true because the universe goes through 720 degrees of rotation to get back to exactly where it was. That's the same thing as 72, 720, and if you look at this structure that we went over earlier, to get back to where it was, kind of like twice, you have 720 cells. And if you go to the consecutive cosmological verse, this is 720 cells. It's the same number as 72. 720. On a meta-mathematical level, they're not the different numbers. And so I know that, and so when I was looking at like symmetries that I was kind of like showing earlier, when I took all the values out of the calculative model of the cosmological verse, you get all these, and then I was like, okay, I deduped them, and you get what? Count of 19. Wow, that's fascinating. Exactly what you would kind of expect. But can you dedupe these even more? Like, how many numbers really are there? And the reality is that this is like 3 and 9. And this is 2 and 6. And this is 2 and 4. And this is 2 and 1. And this is 6, 1 and 6. And so you can do this and till you get 1 and nothing, 1 and 3, because there's no fundamental 0. It's just empty set because non-existence doesn't exist. So just don't put a 0 there. Just leave it. 1 and 5, 4 and 2, 6 and 3. And by the way, you're seeing this 2/3, 1/3 pattern everywhere. Look at this. 1 is 2/3 of 3, and 2 is 2/3 of 3. 1 is 1/3 of 3, and 2 and 1 is 3. 2 is 1/3 of 6, and 4 is 2/3 of 6, and 2 and 4 is 6. 2 is 1. I guess this is where it kind of branches off. That's interesting. But then same thing here. You get back to it. So these follow the pattern. These follow it. But not this. Interesting. So that's something I need to look at more, because I would have expected that to continue a bit, but that's not. Maybe I shouldn't. This is 8 and 4. Let's continue this though. And then obviously these are just already 1s here. And then how do you do this? You just go here, put this here, then you go up, down, over, here, top, and we're going to data filter, and we're going to remove the duplicates, and you're left with 8 values. That's it. And what's interesting is there's one number missing. 7. 7 is missing, and it's always missing, but it's not really missing. It's the stage that we're in this model. It's like, where are we in this process? On number 7, basically. Where it's like, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, basically. You could do it, count it like that, 7, or you can count it like that, 7. So we're right here, essentially. Because remember, like, there's an overlap because there's a dynamic structure being represented statically. So you're never like just right here, like you're in between here and here. And that is that's where we're at. So like where we're at is where it's missing. It's very interesting, is the value that's missing, but it's like you can't see the forest through the trees. So I mean, that kind of makes some sense, maybe. It's just fascinating. But these numbers, there's something about these numbers where we're at that are relevant. And also the fact that 7 isn't there. It's like, it's just interesting. It's hidden. It's there, but it's hidden. And I was just exploring those numbers here. That's what I was doing. And there's fascinating things that I saw, but the thing is that if you branch out too much and you just start pattern chasing it, then what happens is that you will lose context if you lose your goal. And then you're just like, okay, I see pattern, but I don't understand it. So like, people do this with all kinds of things, like I don't know, if you're trying to make us figure out why something is the way that it is, and you realize that every time this happens, it's in this circumstance, and you'll just, if people will ask you, well, why is it that that I don't know, like atomic clocks are called atomic clocks, and it's like, well, because they use atoms or something. And it's like, well, you didn't actually learn anything. You just perceived something, but you didn't like understand it. And I'm trying to I have one example in my head that I'm just like reluctant to share, but it is, it's like people associate things with like, like certain patterns in race and certain patterns in gender and things like that in society. And we're always like, okay, well, look, it's, we'll start creating associations with things that are not, with gender, it's a bit more causative, but with, phenotypical characteristics in people, then it's not, it's like correlative. It's like, I'm just talking about like the correlation, but not causation thing. And I'm just was thinking about like some Twitter posts that I saw that people had made earlier, and Twitter is terrible, and people will obsess about just finding patterns in everything. But if in politics, it's like especially destructive because we're talking about people, and it's very common to think that you understand why something because you're seeing the pattern in it, but it's like there's a difference between seeing the pattern and understanding why it's there. I see a lot of patterns in this math right here. Some of them, the ones that I was showing you earlier, I do actually understand. When we're looking at these ones that I'm like messing with as of today, I don't understand yet. I don't. And I'm not going to claim to. I'm trying to figure it out. But I don't understand. But I see patterns. I don't understand them. And when that's the case, at a certain point, it's important to be able to recognize that you don't understand them and that you've lost the context, and to take a break and stop pattern chasing and get off of YouTube. Anyways, guys, I hope this was somewhat interesting to all three of you watching, but it was a working session, and it's don't hold me to anything that I said here. I was thinking out loud. It's a dangerous thing to do. There's so many other patterns that I do understand that I don't know how to describe yet and show without looking too schizophrenic. But save it for another day. But yeah, I mean, I want to show you, but it will go on forever. And it's important that if I'm going to show something, I have to have a goal in what I'm showing, not just to have the goal of showing the patterns. It has to be like, I have to have the goal of in showing you certain patterns, of explaining why the patterns are there and using the patterns to help explain what is happening. And it's easy for anybody to get lost in that process sometimes. But thank you, everyone. And, if you found this interesting at all, hit the like button. Probably don't share it. It was a little too rough, but, keep it to yourself. All right, thanks. Bye.